Hi, welcome everyone to the Muslim Street. This is Hina Lotus. Usually we use a certain platform called StreamYard to do our videos, but today we have a really special episode all about Iran. This is an episode that I've been wanting to coordinate for a while. We have our guest speaker, Ehsan. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and, I'd love to get straight into this interview because we have a ton of questions to ask you.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to your show. I'm Ehsan Safarnejad. I'm Iranian and I currently am located in one of the southern cities of Iran called Shiraz. Uh, but my background is actually not really related to geopolitics. I have a bachelor's degree in computer science and a master's degree in artificial intelligence and robotic. Uh, from the university of my own city. Uh, it really happened by chance that I sort of became like the Iranian go-to guy for the geopolitical stuff. I think I was in a Twitter space and the host of the RT's crosstalk was there as well. They heard what I had to say about, I think at the time it was uh, Prigozhin's mutiny, and they liked what they heard, and I got invited to their show, and little by little, I got invited to other shows as well. So, like, I never had like I never majored in political science. It just happened by chance, and now I'm on your show.
I mean, that's definitely quite a journey. Would you say that since geopolitics is in your strong suit, would you say talking about excuse me, in Iran is because that's your background per se?
Yeah, that's a very good topic. Let's go with that.
Perfect. Yeah, we definitely at the Muslim Street wanted to kind of get into, we will eventually get into the geopolitics of Iran, but I think because news from Iran is so suppressed in the United States and a lot of what we have in the media is essentially propaganda, we wanted to invite someone who knew a lot about the military, the technology, as well as the political climate to a certain degree over there so you could have unfiltered, uncensored news. Of course, the Muslim Street is journalism for Muslims by Muslims. So, I genuinely hope you guys and enjoy this interview. And we're going to get straight into the questions. So, my first question for you actually was, can we actually get into discussing the technological advancements in Iran? What is the climate over there? What are the advancements? And what are things that we should know as like a predominantly American audience?
Yeah, sure. Uh, well, it, Iranian culture always puts emphasis on education, right? When you talk to a lot of parents, like not going to the university isn't really that much of an option, right? It's not really a choice. Your parents really expect you to go to the university. That's why I think that Iran ranks like fifth or sixth or something on the number of engineers that it produces, uh, standing only after China, Russia, United States, India. And if you look at uh, all those countries, their population dwarfs Iranian population. So it's quite a feat for Iran to actually produce that many engineers, right? And it has translated into what it does for its industry, uh, for its industries. Let me give you an example. So there's this article published by Australian Strategic Policy Institute. What they have done is that they have studied different industries and determined 44 industries that they consider as strategic. Uh, and they have ranked the countries based on how powerful they are in the said industries, and they have ranked them. Uh, Shockingly enough, even to the surprise of somebody like me, Iran even ranks above Japan, which is quite a feat for a country like Iran that has been constantly on the sanctions. Back before the Islamic Revolution in Iran, we weren't really that good. The situation was really abysmal. So to see this happening, it really speaks volume as to what the Iranian government has been able to accomplish. To go into more details and talk about the details a little bit more, because as the saying goes, the demons are always in the details. So one of the industries that Iran is really good at is its space program. It always fascinates me to talk about the Iranian accomplishment in the field of space. Iran has launched multiple satellites into the orbit with Pars, Novak, and another satellite currently being on the line to be launched into the orbit. I think that by the end of the year, the Iranian calendar year, they would be launched into the orbit as well. The resolution on these satellites are quite good. With I think the most advanced satellite that Iran has into the orbit is Khayyam. A bit of a disclaimer here because we were talking about the indigenous technology. This one has been actually made with the help of the Russian Federation. So it's not quite indigenous. It has a resolution of 1 meter. Pars 2 has resolution of 4 meter. Uh, and we have other satellites as well. Hod, for example, that is currently launched. Um, it is an IoT satellite, which is quite a quite a trend here, right? The Internet of Things is, I wouldn't say it's a new trend, but uh, in the past 5 to 10 years, 5 to 6, 7 years, it has become more and more popular with the geeks and nerds and everything. So that's one aspect of the technological advancement that Iran has been able to accomplish. Uh, Let me remind your audience that there are only 11 countries that are able to launch satellites into the orbit. And a part of that is due to the advancement that Iran has had in the field of missile technology. When you go to the university, they don't really have a missile design course. Usually, the name of the major is rocket science and aeronauticals, right? So, funnily enough, when United States or I mean the U.S. regime officials they say the Iranian space program is a cover-up for its intercontinental ballistic missile program. It's actually quite the opposite. I think it's the Qased SLV satellite launch vehicle. Uh, with Qased, the first stage of the missile, not the missile, the satellite launch vehicle, is actually the Sajil missile of Iran, right? So the military advancement has been transferred into the civilian sector in order to make the lives of the average Iranians better. So it's actually quite the opposite of what they say they're talking. It's the opposite of their talking point. So that's the space industry, which is very important, especially if you're in a country like Iran, that is facing different problems like drought, right? You most certainly uh, need your satellites in order to, plan ahead, take care of your environment. And, the usages vary as something minor as, the weather forecasting, which can save the lives of people, warning them uh, of any possible flood, to major things like war, which is a sort of military usage, and we saw that in the conflict. I wouldn't really say conflict, but the Palestinian resistance against the Israeli genocide. Well, the data that was given to the Palestinian side uh, sometimes came from the Iranian satellite. So that's one aspect of the Iranian technological advancement. If we go to the health sector, Iran currently uh, exports medicinal devices that are used in intensive care unit to 55 different countries. And among those countries are some major European names. I think Italy is one of the destinations for the export of the Iranian medical devices with ventilators, health monitors, and some other uh, devices that are used in the ICU being major and prominent um, goods that Iran does export. We also export surgeon robots to Indonesia. It's called Sina, the Sina surgeon robot. And in the past couple of years, a deal has been struck between Iran and Russia. The parts are produced and manufactured inside Iran, then they are transferred into Russia. There's a there's a plan for making a sort of assembly line inside Russia to then use Russia as a sort of hub to export the Iranian surgeon robots. Uh, so that's also something that Iran does. Looking at uh, for example, nanotechnology, the stem cell research, uh, those are two industries that Iran is a powerhouse. I think that the number of research papers that Iran publishes in the field of nanotechnology, if you rank the countries based on the papers that they publish, their impact factor, and uh, the citation, apologies, not impact factor, the citation and everything, Iran would rank as the uh, fourth country that has like the most papers that are published in the terms of nanotechnology. So that is something that Iran does well too. Uh, Talking about the gas turbines that Iran produces, and this sort of became prominent. Many people were drawn to pay attention to Iranian, uh, gas turbine industry after the Western Hemisphere, the countries in the West, they
Is that
started
something?
imposing.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, is that something that Iran is noted for? Gas turbine, is that their strongest suit, you would say?
I wouldn't say that it's their strongest suit of Iran. There is this group in Iran. It's called MAPNA uh, Industrial Group or Conglomerate or something, and they do a lot of things, from renewable energy to devices that are produced for power plants, producing gas turbines. They do a lot of things. They produce electric cars. So, I mean, it's really hard to say what is the Iranian strong suit. Uh, Iran, in a way, is jack of all trade, master of none. Uh, for example, I was talking to some of my friends in Europe, and they say that they really like the Iranian home appliances. Uh, they prefer it to even Chinese home appliances.
What
Uh,
makes Iranian home appliances differ from the ones in Europe or China or even America per se?
with regards to what you purchase from Iran, it's always a high quality product that is very cost effective, right? So because of the fact that the labor in Iran is so cheap, uh, this might sound like a joke, but Iranians are able to out China China. Uh, Yeah, in a way. So it's always a good product, a high quality product with a very low price and with an outstanding customer service, customer protection services that they provide you with. So I would say that's the Iranian forte. Let's talk about the the Iranian gas turbines for a little bit, if that's okay with you.
Of course, definitely.
So, for example, I think that there are 8 countries, 8 or 9 countries that produce Class F gas turbines, right?
Which
You can
countries are
class
they? Do you know at the top of your head?
United States, France, China. I've seen people bringing up Russia, but that's a complicated one, and we might uh, need to talk about the specifics of that. But I think it's Italy, also South Korea. Uh, I don't remember the others. Uh, Iran uh, just recently unveiled. I think I forgot the name of the gas turbine, but it's a Class F gas turbine. Very good, very stable, with a very good efficiency, and you know the gas turbines that Iran produces don't come with the package that the Western countries uh, sort of bundle their products with. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So Russia was purchasing, by the way, Germany also produces some of the best gas turbines in the world. So uh, Russia was purchasing gas turbines for its Nord Stream pipelines from Germany. Germany, after Russia started this special military operation in Ukraine, uh, complied with the unilateral sanctions that United States imposed on Russia. And when I say the package, that's exactly what I talk about. It's a unilateral sanction. Why do you need to comply with something that a country has imposed on another country? And then, talk about how the Western world is always about the capitalism and the freedom of market, the freedom of capital. And there are also other things that come with the contract that you sign with the Western countries. They sort of, in a way, humiliate you. So these products, these top products, uh, they require a lot of patience, a lot of attention. Uh, when it comes to the maintenance, Russia had to send the gas turbines to Germany, but Germany wouldn't repair it itself. They would also turn it to Canada. I think there's a facility in Quebec that does the maintenance for Germany. And then, that facility sends the gas turbines back to Germany, and then Germany sends it to Russia. That's what the Western world does. Imagine all of those things being the problem, and then imagine the deal that Iran offers you. A very high quality product with a very low price, with outstanding customer service. You don't need to jump through all the hoops. Sending your stuff in different countries, and each of them might cause problem for you, as it was the case with Canada and the sanctions on Russia. So that's not an issue with Iran. That the specific thing is also the case for many other industries in Iran, right? If you want to launch satellites into the low Earth orbit, you have a lot of options. But the thing is that if you give it to the Iranians, uh, you don't really have to pay that much money in order to do so. And again, like it's always with the customer services that Iran provides uh, the end user with, that is like the strong suit of Iran. So that is I would say that's what makes Iran a top contender for being a player in the global market.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like I mean, there's a multitude of reasons, obviously, that there are sanctions and suppression with news and everything going on. But that being prefaced, it sounds like because Iran is such a strong contender, do you think that's one of the reasons that the West doesn't allow it to be globalized per se, at least within the context of the Western world?
Exactly, exactly. You touched on a very important subject. There are multiple reasons for Iran being sanctioned. One of the major ones was the fact that Iran never stopped supporting Palestine. After the revolution in Iran, the Iranians took the embassy of, I mean, back then it was called, during the time of Shah, it was called the Israeli embassy, but we all know that Israel doesn't really exist.
Right.
So yeah, so after the revolution, we took the embassy, we gave it to the Palestinians, and then all throughout the years, Iran helped the Palestinian resistance. We even had a pipeline. It was called the Israeli Trans-Pacific or something pipeline. 50% of that belongs to Iran, which, I mean, after the revolution, I mean, that was one of the prices that Iran paid for its support of Palestine. So that is one major thing as to why they have put so many sanctions on Iran. But the point that you brought up is also true. Back during the Ahmadinejad time, and this is a very tricky subject because the Iranians, I mean, Ahmadinejad is a weird entity, to say the least. Uh, Without appearing like an Ahmadinejad fan, because I have like my quarrel with the guy, and I do share a lot of criticism that people have about how he handled situation. But without like sounding like an Ahmadinejad fanboy again, back then Iranian advancement was through the roof. Iran was just skyrocketing in terms of the technology. It was it was then that the Western world sort of began revisiting its policy and the way that it was viewing Iran. You have a country that is resource rich, which has a young population, also a lot of labor force. The education system in that country is top notch. And then they are not content with purchasing products from other countries. Their
So
mentality
they're
is that,
self-sufficient, which is a huge threat to the capitalist global market.
yeah, and that country needs to be stopped, otherwise it becomes a superpower. I'll give you an example. 2 decades ago, the Iranian tech industry produced its uh, central processing unit. That's something that people don't know because people were talking about the CPU warfare, uh, the semiconductor warfare between United States and China, right? Always bringing that topic up when we were talking about the Taiwan, uh, the Taiwan province of China. Uh, that was one of the reasons that you know these two countries had major problems with. And to imagine that 2 decades ago, Iran actually produced the CPU within the confines of its borders is actually astonishing. Now, I have to say that that later on, I mean that processing unit, that central processing unit wasn't really that successful, but it was a major leap for Iran. But after the sanctions, after everything that happened, Iran just couldn't maintain what it wanted to do, so the plan sort of shifted. But yes,
But do you
absolutely.
mind
And
if I bring up a point though? Despite all the sanctions and the issues that Iran is going through as a byproduct of the West, it is still doing so well. And if these sanctions were lifted, I think it would be a very, very big threat, which is one of the reasons the West keeps these sanctions. Of course, it's for geopolitical reasons and X, Y, and Z, and that's a completely different topic. But I think we've seen this through the course of the Western or American empire. You have countries that are self-sufficient and doing really well in certain markets that would then, completely threaten the West in terms of their own their profits and their capitalistic domination per se, right? In terms of these sectors. So, I'm glad that you're actually bringing up all these points because it really makes, well, myself and I'm sure plenty of people in the audience understand that what we see in American news in terms of sanctions, like, oh, the government is X, Y, and Z, and whatever the case may be, sanctions for, a lot of the time are very economic in nature because they pose an economic threat to America, to Canada, to, all these European countries. And so lifting these sanctions would very easily, in my opinion, turn Iran into like a mega superpower, which would dismantle a lot of the markets you see in the West. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I've talked about this on multiple occasions, so I hope that, your audience won't be bored by what I'm about to say. So, because I'm about warning. This is a warning.
Our
I'm about
audience
to go
loves
on a tangent.
controversy, so bring
Yeah.
it on. We're ready. The Muslim Street is ready.
Uh, United States is able to weaponize absolutely anything. Anything. You talk about the nuclear technology. The Iranian nuclear program is really, really, I wouldn't say it's advanced but for Iranian standard and for the sanctions that we are under, it's rather impressive because Iran does all the mining, milling, the enrichment, the design of the centrifuges, the manufacturing of different parts that are used in the centrifuges, the manufacturing of the centrifuges themselves, the design of reactor, the manufacturing of the reactors. Uh, Iran does everything itself, right? So, which is rather impressive because, like, I was reading a study, and it seems that even China does like 90 something percent of this stuff itself. It doesn't do everything itself. So it's quite impressive, in my humble opinion, what Iran has been able to do. And the usage is very clear. So, for example, Iran produces oxygen, a certain isotope of oxygen, oxygen 18, that has a wide use in the field of medicine. It is used for detection of the certain diseases. It's a very important isotope.
Has
Uh,
Oh, I apologize. I just had a quick question. Has the technology in Iran helped medical advancements in Iran as well? Like, is the medical industry or sector, if you will, is it like top notch compared to the rest of the world, or do you think the sanctions have kind of, affected that as well?
it goes both ways. So when people have, for example, cancer, some of the stuff comes from, outside of the country. And when you're sanctioned, the least bit of your problem is, providing that medicine, that specific medicine for your loved one. You also have to deal with the currency devaluation. You have to deal with, a lot of things that are not really related to your loved one, right? You have to go through all these different things, and rather than focusing on this sort of tragic thing that your loved one is going through, you have to be concerned about everything else. There is this disease called epidermolysis bullosa. I bring this disease up a lot because it's very important to know. There are certain things that countries can't really do. The people who have EB, their skin is sort of fragile, right? So they get regular wounds on their skin, on their mucous membrane, that's your nose cavity, ear cavity, your throat, even sometimes depending on the uh, seriousness of the illness itself, sometimes the breathing becomes a chore. they have to use a certain kind of bandage. They can't use the bandage that you and I use. They have to use a very specific one. These bandages are produced by two companies, two or three companies, and these companies are located in Switzerland and Sweden, I think. Uh, because of the fact that sanctions are imposed on Iran and their compliance with these sanction regimes that the United States has imposed against Iran, you can't import these bandages to Iran. As a result of that, a 4-year-old kid called Ava passed away, not because of medical negligence by her parents or the Iranian authorities. No, because of the fact that we can't import those bandages. Now, people might say, why doesn't Iran manufacture those bandages within the confines of its borders? Well, because it's a very rare genetic disorder. Something like, I do not bring up the numbers because I have actually forgotten about the number, but it's a disease that affects like one person in like every 250,000 people,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So
That's
yeah,
very, very rare.
so in Iran, like there are like 160 or something people that have to deal with this disease. The way that this disease works, I mean, if you want to think about it from the standpoint of medicinal companies, the way that they make their profit is by sort of selling their goods on the global market. A certain country, a specific country is not profitable enough for you to just, produce your goods and for the patients in the said country, right? Otherwise, you have to like uh, put a price tag on your product that says like $150,000, right?
Right.
Basically, the price of a house on your product. The way that they make their profit is by mass producing it and then selling it on the global market. Uh, Obviously, that's something that Iran can't do again because of the sanctions, because the sanctions don't just make you have difficulties with importing stuff. It also renders uh, sort of hinders your ability in exporting your products as well. So
And
that's also.
that's actually something I wanted to bring up, especially for our audience when we hear the term sanctions in Western MSM, like CNN, MSNBC, Fox. They kind of make it seem like these sanctions are stopping Iran from bombing the world or whatever the propaganda that they spew, right? And it's from a very we're preventing them from bullying the world, which is ironic because it's the US that's bullying the world. But sanctions also, most of the time are actually not hurting the government or its ability to create war or anything of that nature or fight. It's actually human rights violations because it's affecting, children, it's affecting women, it's affecting the medical markets, it's affecting education. And these are everyday common people who have nothing to do with geopolitical or government interests from the Western side or the Iranian side. And that's something that, I'm glad you're bringing up. And I'm sure these bandages are only one example out of a multitude of things that the sanctions have done to Iran.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does make an average Iranian life hard in different ways. The brain drain, for example, in Iran, that's one of the reasons behind the brain drain, right? You go through a very top-notch education. You become like this person, this outstanding engineer, and then you can't basically sell your services to the world, right? As a result of that, this frustration begins to pent up inside people, and they eventually leave their country. So it's as if Iran is providing United States with a subsidy on the education, because then these engineers go to United States or other Europe or other Western countries. Germany, Italy are very popular spots for the Iranian engineers. They go into those countries, and then, with the education that they have, they do a lot of things for those countries. It's even sort of bad for an average American as well, because you have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to go through
To a
education.
mediocre education where you're not even competitive in the global market. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
true.
and an average Iranian, because of the fact that the education in Iran is free for most part. We have two different universities. We have private universities and governmental funded universities. Ironically enough, the best universities in Iran are not the private ones. They are the government-backed universities like Sanati Sharif, the Shiraz University that I majored in. Uh, so, I mean, you sort of this is sort of like an unfair competition between an average Iranian and an average American, because you have to pay money for your education. I don't. And
But isn't that so interesting? Because US education is so expensive and so many individuals take out, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in loans that they're not even able to pay, and they're not even competitive, forget in the global market, but even in the American market. Because here you have, people immigrating from other countries or coming on, these student visas or work visas who are far more educated, do not have this debt, and are willing to work for a lot less. So I think when, Americans get really upset about certain issues, they need to look at their own governments and ask, why are you taking our taxpayer money and investing it into imperialism, right? Which is actually hurting US security, as opposed to investing this money back into our own education to help our own job prospects, right? That would actually build America's economy. That's something that I think a lot of Americans don't think about. And again, that comes down to the propaganda that we've been fed. Hey, we need these sanctions, and oh, look at all these individuals coming and stealing our jobs. But they don't go to the source of it, which is our government. Our government is doing this by design. It's not just hurting, Iran and other countries. It's hurting Americans as well, as a byproduct of our own taxpayer money. It's not going into infrastructure. It's not going into schools. It's not going into education. It's not going into healthcare. It's essentially marginalizing its own population. And of course, being used to bomb, sanction, create proxy wars, across the rest of the globe, right? So that, I'm glad we're actually having this conversation, because I think, the Muslim Street is very passionate about helping individuals, the global ummah, if you will, but predominantly the American ummah, understand that, Western imperialism, capitalism, these governments, they're not just, hurting third world countries or other countries. I don't even like saying third world countries, but other countries all over the world. It's hurting people right here at home. You know what I mean? So the more we educate the world and, help people understand the truth, independent of the propaganda that we've been fed, I think more people will understand the role of their respective, government. So I did want to just share that, not to take away from, what you're discussing by any means.
yeah, uh, the sanctions. They're one of the nasty ways that you can punish a country, because the punishment is a collective one. And as you brought up, this is the human rights abuse, human rights violation. Uh, there are many things that the individuals inside Iran have to go through with. And as you brought up, this actually goes against the principles of the free market. You know, because United States can't really compete fairly with other countries, they have to go and do stuff like this in order to, prevent other countries from rising up. I always say, United States' status as the most powerful country in the world comes from holding other countries down, not from advancing itself, not by, doing things better in a more efficient way. And that's why you have sanctions, and then the sanctions put the population against one another as well.
Right.
So, like, there is a lot of discussion inside Iran, for example, about the JCPOA. And some people, because of the fact that they think JCPOA is the solution to all of our problem, view other fraction of the population, such as myself, that don't tend to favorably view the negotiation with the United States or the JCPOA, Iran nuclear deal, however we want to reference it. Uh,
And just to make
because,
sure, so our audience is following, just to make sure, we're talking about that Iran, what was coined as the Iran nuclear deal under Obama that we saw basically dismantled under the previous Trump administration. Is that correct?
yes, but because of the fact that like certain individuals, such as myself, don't view that deal as a good one, then it sort of pits compatriots against one another, with some people being blamed for the sanctions. It's a very weird thing. It's like seeing a person that you like being beaten and then look at, your friend and say, well, it's all your fault, not really putting the blame on the person who was doing the beating, you know, but putting the blame on the people who think that independence, resisting is the answer to, the problems that we have doing things indigenously and domestically, rather than relying on the empty promises of powers like United States or like the European countries that really never come to fruition. We have seen, uh, different iteration of these negotiations. People don't know this because, every time I was reading the mainstream media articles about JCPOA or Iran nuclear deal, they were always trying to portray it as, well, we finally have a deal that this crazy regime, the Iranian regime, was finally willing to come to the table and negotiate this deal because of the pressure that we exerted on them. And they finally were willing to talk to us. This is the very biased and completely unfactual reporting on this, because Iran negotiated with the United States and the Western countries quite a few times after the Islamic Revolution. So, for example, we had the Algiers Accords. This was a series of agreements between Iran and the United States. Back then, the use of the term sanction wasn't really that popular. So when you go and read that document, it says, you know, it has like 3 or 4 provisions about the commitments of United States uh, in the deal with Iran, and they say one of the provisions is that United States will lift the trade ban with Iran. So back then they were calling it trade ban rather than sanctions, but it was essentially the same thing, right? Amongst other provisions of that agreement was the United States will refrain from meddling in Iranian affairs, whether economically speaking or politically speaking. Again, United States didn't carry out that commitment either.
Well, no one is
Uh,
surprised to hear that.
well, and Iran carried out its commitment within that agreement. So that was an episode of negotiation between Iran and United States. Next time, I mean, there were other attempts, but I'm just going through the major ones. There was a series of negotiations between Iran and the European Troika, that's Germany, France, and Britain. The foreign ministers of the said countries came to Iran. I think back at that time, Jack Straw was the foreign minister of the British government. Uh, those three figures, they all went on to have like even more impressive positions in their respective governments, with the German foreign minister, I think, even becoming the chancellor of Germany for a while. So these weren't just some wackos that Iran negotiated with. They came to Iran, they expressed their supposed concern about the Iranian nuclear deal. Iran stopped everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Because, they said that they were worried about Iranian ability of enriching uranium to a high degree, which was ridiculous at the time because Iran wasn't even enriching uranium up to 20%. It was back then, I think it was 5% or something.
Yeah, I had read about that. So basically, the deal had said that if it goes above a certain percentage, then it's in violation of the deal. Is that correct?
Well, this provision, this condition was in different agreements, so it's really hard to pinpoint which agreement you're talking about. But that was certainly a part of the case with what became known as the Tehran Declaration, between the agreement between Iran and the European Troika. Iran stopped everything, not just the enrichment, but Iran also stopped the activities in its UCF, which is the uranium conversion facility. This is one step before the enrichment itself, right? It is the process of producing tetrauranium octoxide, which some people call yellow cake. I don't really like that term, but maybe it helps some people to better understand what I'm talking about. Uh, so Iran even stopped its activities in UCF as well. Uh, the the deal was that Iran is going to stop its nuclear activities for 6 months, and the Europeans, the inspector of United Nations IAEA, the nuclear watchdog of United Nations, to come to Iran, visit everything, and then see if they find anything problematic. 6 years, 6 months turned into 1 year, 1 year turned into 2 years, and then finally, when we expressed our discontent that okay, the deal was, we do this for 6 months, and then you lift the sanctions on us, allowing us to go to the free market. You talk about this like capitalism thingy all the time. So how about allowing us to have a taste at it, a shot at, competing against other countries in the world? But then, they sort of refrained from carrying out their commitments within the Tehran Declaration. So that was also one of the iterations that Iran tried to approach the Western countries, and it carried out its commitments fully, and it even went beyond the sort of call of duty. But the Western countries, because they are so afraid of allowing other countries in the global South to have a fair chance of competing against them, they nagged on their own commitments. Then
I
you had
agree. Oh, I apologize. I was just going to say you touched on this earlier, but I agree with you. It's not that the Western countries are amazing in various different sectors because they have, the best technology and education and, labor force and intelligent minds. It's because they're suppressing the rest of the world, predominantly the global South, from being competitive in the market. And that actually hurts the entire, technology market globally speaking, because it suppresses advancements, not just in the competitive market, but in the entire market. So, for example, that wasn't well said. I guess what I'm trying to say is if you have, if you're functioning at level 8 and you understand that other countries can function at, let's say, a level 10, and you suppress them from that. You make sure that they never go beyond that 8. Now the entire global market is functioning at an 8, when if you let, the global south do what they need to, we could have had, medical advancements, technology advancements, scientific advancements functioning at a much higher level. So this is actually hurting everyone across the board. And the reason that the West does it is for economic purposes. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. Sorry, I just wanted to explain that.
No, that's actually a very important topic that you brought up because I always try to, bring this up, and for whatever reason, people really didn't, subscribe to this notion that, one of the reasons behind the sanctions can be the fact that uh, you want to keep other people down. And I'm not saying that Iran is like this powerhouse. Again, the way that I described at the beginning of the show, uh, the Iranian advancement, I called Iran jack of all trades, master of none, despite the fact that you can even go a little beyond that. But I tried to maintain a certain level of humility in order to, not really exaggerate about the potentials that Iran has. But such potential also exists in other countries in the world, and every time that any country in the global south wants to do anything, the situation becomes problematic. Suddenly they need democracy, and United States military is on the job to provide them with that freedom or right or whatever. You know, exhibit a Libya. It wanted to coin its own currency and sort of unify all the African countries behind this common currency, which then in turn would make the entirety of Africa a powerhouse on the global market. But no, they go and wage war against Libya, completely killing the dreams of every African nationalist in order to progress and advance. And then they have this tiny nuggets that they throw in front of people as charity. Oh, look at this celebrity that we have. If they're so humanitarian, they are going to go to like this country and provide them with like breadcrumbs. Oh, look at Angelina Jolie. She has, adopted like two kids from like Sudan or other African countries. This is like a preposterous notion. Let the countries breathe. Let the countries
They'll they'll bomb
follow.
they'll bomb a country and then give them toothbrushes and be like, "Look, we're the good guys." So, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And going back to Libya just for a moment, I think it's very interesting that any time that a country has, I guess you could say, potentially destabilized the petrodollar, which is, the pinnacle of, the American market. They suddenly need democracy, or, their leader is a dictator, or there's human rights violations being committed, which, it begs the question. I definitely want my audience to think about this. There's a multitude of human rights violations going on all over the world under a multitude of countries, but how come it's the countries that are posing an economic threat to American hegemony and capitalism that suddenly need a complete makeover in terms of their government? Why are they the ones who need military intervention? And a lot of the times, there isn't even a dictator or like a government that the people are unhappy with. Sometimes there aren't even, and not to say I'm not undermining human rights violations, but they're not to the magnitude that the US makes them out to be. This is a very strong topic that I'm very, very passionate about. But we always have to understand that anything that threatens Western domination, and the petrodollar and capitalism, and America, and the West, and the global markets per se, anything that threatens that, America can't come out and essentially say, "Hey, we need to bomb this country because it's posing a threat to our corporations and our oligarchs," right? The Americans would never be like, "Yeah, send our sons to war and take all of our taxpayer money. We want to protect that." So they have to say, "We're the good guys. We have to save this country." It's always a guise, and that's what we hear about, within the context of our media as well.
Yeah, and major example of that is, I would say that like if you want to see the personification of that as a single individual, you have to look no further than Piers Morgan. This is a guy who talks about the Western values and democracy and stuff like this. But when confronted about the fact that Zelensky today is an outright dictator, he has banned, he has restricted certain religious sectors in its population, banned certain books. I thought that the crazy Islamists were the people behind, opposing a fair education, or the freedom of expression of individual opinion shouldn't be uh, you know punished by the government. But Zelensky does that. He fails to hold an election, and then somehow he is a democratic leader standing against this tyrant, this Putin guy, and needs to be supported, no matter how corrupt his country is, no matter the fact that this is one of the most corrupted countries in the world, and no matter uh, what certain fractions of the population. I'm trying to refer to the neo-Nazis, or some people would call them as outright Nazis. No neo prefix needed for them. Uh,
The neo part is
but
just diplomacy at this point.
yeah,
Not that they
and
need it.
yeah, and then a couple of questions later, when Tucker Carlson says, uh, "But killing women and children is an awful thing," and Piers Morgan finally says, "Is it though? Is it though what? Do you understand that killing women and children is bad? Full stop. There is no condition or baggage. Yeah, you can't do that." But for people like Piers Morgan, it's not about human rights. And I think that what many people inside Iran and outside of Iran in global south are fed up with, and that goes to certain length, that sometimes that may express itself, show itself as these people glorifying certain individuals that you know that have done some wrongdoings. That's due to the fact that people are fed up with the hypocrisy. You can't, every time you see the US permanent mission in United Nations talking about human rights. I mean, at least every time I see them talking on the global stage about the human rights, I outright want to vomit, because you have this like individuals who go and say, well, 2-year old, fill in the blank with some random name, has been bombed by Putin, and this and that. And obviously, I'm not trying to make fun of the kids in a war. I'm not trying to do that, but I'm trying to make fun of this individuals that talk about those hypothetical kids. And here you have the 4-year-old Ava that was, in my opinion, she was killed by United States, out plain and
No,
simple.
that's a fair assessment. I think anytime there are sanctions and military intervention and proxy wars and things that are hurting these countries, if people are dying, especially children and women, as a byproduct of, the actions of the United States, that's murder. That is blood on our hands as a byproduct of our very own taxpayer money. And I think one thing that people don't understand is something that they've imprinted into the Western consciousness, if you will, is they always say, this is just collateral damage. But then you have to, think about it. Why are there some people's lives, innocent lives that are lost of some children? Why is that coined collateral damage? But if it's people that are being hurt in, European countries or Western countries, that hypothetically might be hurt, not even actually hurt or killed, then, that is a human rights violation. We have to protect it at all costs, right? That's a byproduct of it's white supremacy, it's upholding capitalism, it's all these power structures at play. They're basically saying that human rights is an issue, but it only applies to specific demographics all across the world. It's not globally recognized. And I think that's something that the Western world has to wake up and understand. Why does the West get to decide who dies and who doesn't, and when it's considered collateral damage and when it's considered a human rights violation?
Yeah, but you know that they're not serious about it and they're hypocrites when Madeleine Albright says 500,000 Iraqi kids being killed, again, killed, not dying, was a price worth paying, in her opinion, when she was the Secretary of State of the United States. So, I mean, the hypocrisy is out there. But then again, like one of the things that I guess, I mean, I'm not trying to compliment Trump, but one of the things that is sort of positive, an unintended positive of Trump's presidency, is the fact that this guy is just so not a politician that he comes out and says the quiet parts out loud. And this maybe brings awareness to more and more people about what United States does wrong, right? With outright suggestions about Gaza and the fact that they want to basically ethnically cleanse Palestinians right now based on Trump's suggestion. So it sort of shows that the emperor is naked, that all these empty promises and empty talks about human rights and upholding civilian civilian uh, rights and democratic values, human rights value, they're all nonsense. Because at the end of the day, when you look at for example, something like the drone program of Obama administration, it had 90% civilian casualty rate. So is Trump really that different from Obama? Is it really, or is this guy just a guy with a loud mouth who doesn't have a filter in his brain and he just says everything that comes into his mind? Who knows who is actually the worst guy? The point is that the policies don't really change. The Muslim countries in my region have been bombed during George W. Bush, during Bill Clinton, during Trump, during Obama. No matter who's in charge in White House, we see weddings turning into funerals in Afghanistan or in other countries under the red administration and the blue administration. So it doesn't really matter. That's why, like, certain people come and say, okay, like you had this deal with Obama administration, JCPOA, and that shows that the Democrats are more willing to negotiate deal with Iran. But then they fail to mention that Obama, from the very first day of the deal being signed, violated the deal, despite the fact that Iran carried out its commitments a full year ahead of United States or other countries joining the deal. So 1 year before the signing of the JCPOA, there is a report by the IAEA. It was published on, I think, March 2014. And if you go and read that report, it says that uh, Iran is carrying out its commitments as a show of goodwill and in order to show its honesty and its willingness to cooperate with the Western countries. Uh, it is doing all the things that it does. And you can see that Iran is even limiting its enrichment to 3.85%, which is, I mean, the exact limitation within the JCPOA. So, once you understand that there is not really that much difference between these two, metaphorically speaking, these two hands of United States, the Democrats and the Republican, it, it just it just renders all the things that they can do to you pointless, because then you understand that the carrot and stick approach uh, doesn't work on you anymore. And I think that if the countries try to take their destiny into their own hand, which, I mean, BRICS, I think, is a rather good example of that. If they go through with the promise that they have made, in a way, to the countries of global south in order to do what they said that they would do. I mean, this can set up an example for the countries in global south to do what they can domestically, because in my opinion, comes out of nothing good ever comes out of the promises made by United States, the European Troika, or the Western countries in general. It's just a continuation. Look at what happened in Gaza. A, a full year of 15 months, actually, I think. 15 months of consecutive onslaughts on this helpless population that is completely isolated from the rest of the world, with no really solid backing from any major power. uh you know and then, even now, the lawyers, I actually had this conversation with my brother. He is majored in law, and say, I still can't understand for the life of me how people are still negotiating and talking and debating about whether what happened in Gaza is an example of genocide or not. Like, it completely baffles me how that can be, that the opposite argument can be made. But here we are, the arguments are being made. People are still calling it complicated, complex situation. And then on the other hand, you have these audacious, pretentious claims by mainstream media and the constant bashing of the rising power. I mean, you can't really call China a rising power, but I think people are sort of becoming aware of what is happening with regards to China, especially with the sort of episode, that sort of psychotic episode that US regime officials had by banning the TikTok, which is, funnily enough, a company that is owned by a Singaporean gentleman of Chinese origin, and then drawing the Americans out into Red Note, which is completely a Chinese social media. And then people were sort of red pilled about, oh, wait a second, like, you have all these advanced things in China, and United States doesn't have any of that.
I
So
mean,
I
the
think,
United, oh, I apologize. I was just going to say, I think the United States was trying to really assert control and dominance over their own population. Freedom of expression is theoretical, and that was a example of that. but they ended up shooting themselves in the foot because as opposed to, Americans now no longer having any access to, an app that was supposedly Chinese propaganda, they went straight to the source by downloading Red Note and then seeing for themselves what's going on in China. And they're like, wait a second, if we're the greatest country in the world, how come our transportation is crap? How come our infrastructure is terrible? How come our food is, full of chemicals? And it's really interesting because I think it started direct conversations between, Chinese individuals, especially the youth there and the youth over here. And so I think the US thought they were doing something amazing, right? By again trying to suppress journalism, news, and education to their own people. But they ended up kind of creating this hole or gap that forced the population to go directly to the source. So it's interesting. I think the more that the US tries to hide the truth, I think the worse it is for them because the truth ultimately always comes out. I think it's the same thing that you're talking about in terms of the genocide discourse. They're still arguing in the media whether it's a genocide or not, but people who were apolitical or didn't know anything about Israel or Palestine, you can say before October 7th, even they now took it upon themselves to do the independent research. And, it does help that we have all these different apps all over the world where people directly from Gaza were able to post things on TikTok. They were able to post things on Snapchat. They were able to post things on Instagram and Facebook. And even though you have Meta, right, which with Zuckerberg trying to suppress things on Instagram, trying to suppress things on Facebook, the truth ultimately comes out. So I think that the more that they lie and the more that they try to hide, I think the more it's emboldening the American population. Because I remember when I was in college, I was very, very, and this was a very long time ago, but I was very, very passionate about Palestine. But when I would speak about it, a lot of people would be like, oh, well, it's a really complex subject, or I don't know much about it, or, whatever the case may be. I feel like after October 7th, even the most apolitical people I know, they've become very brave and courageous in speaking out against the human rights violations. And, I always make it a point to tell people it's not a war. It's 100% a genocide because for it to be a war, there has to be two militaries. I mean, Palestine, Gaza, especially, there is no military, right? There is no, it's not equivalent in terms of the manpower that Israel has, right, with the dome and everything, and the infrastructure that Gaza has, which is practically nothing. So it's 100% a genocide. There's no question about it. The only people that are questioning it or pretending to question it are people who are benefiting from it.
Again, this actually ties up in what we talked about earlier, the fact that United States holds other countries down in order to remain as the top country and maintain its status. You brought up China, and it's ridiculous to compare United States to China. Your transportation system isn't even comparable to that of my country. Uh, Compare the undergrounds in Iran, the subway system in Iran with the United States. I can't believe that people are willing to go into, the train carts inside New York City. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you get like two or three different variations of STD and contagious diseases from just like breathing in the same air that that is in the subway system of United States, and more specifically the New York City. It's completely insane. And
Well,
then
it strengthens our immune systems, which is necessary for all the chemicals and pesticides in our food. So it serves that purpose, I guess you could say. But, actually, there's an interesting anecdote to this that I wanted to bring up. Um, I live in Florida, and the state of Florida, this is how deep the propaganda goes. There was a bill, I want to say, and I'm probably butchering this. I haven't, looked into it too deeply, but I want to say several years ago, there was a bill that or there was a bill that they were trying to pass, and basically the population, in the state of Florida had to vote if whether they wanted public transportation or not. And the propaganda in the media ran so deep that people voted against it, even though it was something that would be benefiting them. They voted against their own public transportation. And that's why I think the Muslim Street, for example, which is one of many, there needs to be a rise of independent journalism and media within the context of the West. Because, yes, the West feeds a lot of propaganda about the global South, but they indoctrinate their own populations to vote for and do things and support things and advocate for things that hurt and marginalize them as well. And so, this is why I'm so happy that we're, having this discussion. And I was hoping we could actually segue into something that is a little off topic, but I've been dying to ask you this question quite actually. Since we were talking about Iran's nuclear capabilities, when we talk about the Islamic world, the only recognized, country in the Islamic world that is a nuclear power would be Pakistan. What are the relations between Iran and Pakistan? I'm just very curious on that.
Unfortunately, like things are not as good as like a person like me would like them to be. And I think that in the Islamic world, unfortunately, no matter what we do, I mean, there's that kind of divide that exists, and it is, you know, United States, Britain, and other Western powers, they do their best in order to prevent these countries from joining, you know. There was a policy that Dr. Raisi was pursuing. I always used to use, boxing techniques as, an analogy to what that strategy was about. So Iran was trying to strike deals with, different countries in the region. That's sort of the equivalent of when two boxers sort of clinch, because as you get closer to one another, your fist can't travel, the same distance, and your ability in hurting each other becomes less and less. So that was something that Iran was trying to do by striking these economic deals with different countries like Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region. Iran was basically saying, okay, look, you have a vested interest in my country. If you attack me, you attack your own interests. And I am willing to invest in your country in order to show that I'm not going to attack you either, right? So there is no point in, fighting. That was actually the very similar to the worries that United States had with regards to Russia and Germany. The claim was if Europe becomes energy dependent on Russia, then they would have less of incentive to uh, stand up against the Russian invasions and everything like that, which was nonsense. But I mean, the principle was real. Iran was basically trying to do the same thing. One of the major examples of that is this pipeline that we call the peace pipeline. It goes from Iran to Pakistan to India. It had major benefits, not just for Iran and India, but also for Pakistan. And I'll try to explain it in a moment. But this project never came into fruition because Pakistan refrained from carrying out its obligation. In fact, $18 billion in project forfeit has to be paid to Iran by Pakistan. But why does this happen? Because, I mean, there's a reason why they say that no prime minister inside Pakistan has ever served its full 5-year term. There's a reason for that. Because the military has a lot of power, and then you have United States meddling, and they go against projects like this. And again, some people, like if you have Indian audience, some people might find it offensive, but it would even serve the interest of Pakistan as controlling India, you know, like what Ukraine is doing. Ukraine said that Russia is selling its gas to, the European countries. It is going through my territories. If they get any funny ideas, we're going to cut off that road. Pakistan could do that with India, since there's a whole backstory with India and Pakistan there. And again, like some people might find it offensive, but I'm bringing this up in order to say that this project had multiple advantages for Pakistan, not just in terms of the revenue that it would generate for Pakistan, but unfortunately, Pakistan is not willing to complete its side of the pipeline. Surprise, surprise, because the United States doesn't want it. And then you have, the problems in the sort of no man's land of Pakistan and Iran. And I'm not going to put any blame on any country. I'm completely going to not go into any details, but again, uh, when you see the tactical gears that these supposed like insane groups uh, use and wear, the gear is American made. So it's clear who has a hand in destabilizing this region. This land could have bring Iran and Pakistan together, because right next to this region there is this port called Chabahar inside Iran. And this port, due to its proximity to the equator, is a very good place for launching satellites into the orbit, especially those satellites that go to the geostationary uh, orbit, which is very important, the 36,000 kilometer altitude. But that is a potential that is not being used, because the powers outside of this region, the aliens to this region, the Western countries, they don't want to see the progression of the Macron coastlines. They don't want to see growth and progress in Pakistan. And this is a wasted potential, right? Again, like I'm not going to go into the details of why that is the case, because I don't think that it is helping us. People might get defensive and everything. I'm putting the major blame on United States, right? Because it is so. It is the case. It is the fact that these are all the agendas of the Five-Eyed countries, the NATO countries, to prevent this region from progressing. Unfortunately, things are not as good as one would have hoped, but because of the fact that I talked about a lot of negative things, let me end this on a positive note, because we Iranians tend to take pride in us being a grateful bunch, and we have not forgotten how the Iranian nuclear program started. We had help from major figures inside Pakistan like A.Q. Khan. And I'm sure that your Pakistani audience are cognizant about that history and everything that happens between Iran and Pakistan. So the potential is there. The history shows that we are we have this potential to unlock something really, really powerful and to do great things. We have the example, we have the outline and the roadmap, not the roadmap based on the future, but we can design a roadmap based on the experiences that we had in the past. You know, working on joint projects that would serve the interest of both Iran and Pakistan, helping each other in terms of energy, helping each other in terms of labor, because it's interesting. The small workshops that exist in Pakistan, that's a very big potential that, I talked about how Iran is able to out China. Pakistan is able to out Iran. And so this is a very, very major potential that exists there. And unfortunately, again, like if you ask me, there are so many things that can be done. But unfortunately, this is a wasted potential. But at least what we have is figures from two countries talking rather positively. It wasn't always the case back in, I have to be, again, like I have to go to the negative dark side as well, now that Brett brought this up. But during the riots in Iran, riots of, I think it was 2 years ago, the riots that took place inside Iran 2 years ago, unfortunately, things were said from the Pakistani officials, said by the Pakistani officials, that weren't really constructive. And I think that, the more that we tend to sort of acknowledge that there are problems, but do not go into the details. At least this is what I'm trying to do. I acknowledge that there are problems there, but I do not go into the details and try to not really put blame on any country. I'm just trying to bring awareness to the problem. And then by refraining from, going into the details, I'm hoping that people wouldn't be angry and we maintain this sort of connection that we have in order to do again great things. The Iranian military is rather powerful. It, the Iranian Navy is doing a lot of amazing things. The Iranian missile program, the Iranian drone program is so sophisticated that we even sent drones to Russia, a superpower, a literal superpower. We sent satellites into the orbit. But one thing that Iran is not good at, unfortunately, is its air force. Pakistan is powerful in that regard. They can help Iran, and we can help them with their space program, with the drone program, with the medic the in the field of medicine. We can do so many great things together. But unfortunately, again, I think that this is a wasted potential that exists between the two countries, which hopefully in the future would be strengthened by the willpower of people and their awareness and their cognizance of the strength of the other side and the ways that the populations can help one another.
I think I think that's part of Western imperialism, though. History over the last, well, few centuries, to be candid, has shown us time and time again that the way that the West has conquered, right, during the times of colonization, right, or colonialism, and now we see it during U.S. military intervention, if you will, and imperialism per se, it's conquer and divide. So as long as Pakistan and India, or not India, but Pakistan and Iran and all these different countries, even in the context of North Africa and the Middle East, as long as they do not work with each other and unite as like a globalized ummah per se, it doesn't benefit them. It only benefits the West because it makes it a lot easier for them to have these proxy wars, to create these sanctions, to hurt these countries economically, politically, in terms of their military and things of that nature. We always have to understand that when countries are working against each other in the global south, it's not empowering them as individuals. It's actually hurting not just them, but all their neighboring countries as well. And this is exactly what the West wants. So, for example, if the discourse between two Iranians is, well, why should we not work with Pakistan? Or if Pakistan is talking about, well, this is why we shouldn't work with Arab countries, that discourse is not benefiting Pakistanis. It's not benefiting Arabs. It's not benefiting Iranians. You know who it's benefiting? It's benefiting the United States. And the interesting thing about that is the United States is the one benefiting to begin with. Now we're just putting, more money and power, and the ability to monopolize, right into their hands. So at this point, we have to take personal responsibility. And I say that as a Pakistani American in the United States. Um, as Muslims, right? Because we are the Muslim street. As Muslims, we have to understand that working with each other, regardless of our political ideologies, our views on economics, our education level, our socioeconomic class, our ethnicity, various different sects within, Islam itself, and the list goes on and on. If we work with each other, it is only going to strengthen ourselves as individuals and in terms of the global ummah itself. And so, how do we do that? That's a very big and broad question, but we have to have the conversations that you and I are having. The discourse starts with the individuals. And we also have to understand that governments, in theory, are supposed to be for the people, by the people. And so if governments are not representing the people, people have to get together and work with each other to make changes in the context of their individual countries. And then we have to take a step further and work with other countries within the context of the global south and recognize that there's power in numbers, right? As an individual country, Pakistan is not going to be able to do much, and either can Iran, either can all these, countries within the Swana region. But if they were working with each other as opposed to pandering to the West. And, like you said, anytime that they've tried to work with the West, anytime they've tried to work with the United States, it's only hurt them, right? The US has never kept their promises. They've never kept their end of the bargain when it comes to any of these deals. So if these countries start working with each other, it will be that much harder for the West to bomb, to sanction, to create these wars, and to impede on the economic growth, I think, of the global South. And I do have one more question, and then I will be out of your hair, if you don't mind. It's an opinion related question, so please answer it as you would like. I don't think anyone can honestly answer this question 100% factually and honestly, but there's a lot of talk in the West about nuclear war. And I think there's a lot of suppressed news in the West in terms of, what are the chances of it? How likely is it to occur? The propaganda over here, it hits very hard. So, as an Iranian sitting in Iran, what are the chances of us seeing nuclear war in the near future from, your perspective and your experience?
You know, the geopolitics currently is like the, and I do, sorry, and I do apologize for using, that's the name of the TV show, program, or movie, or whatever. It's like an episode of the movie or TV show Jackass, in which they sort of carry out extreme pranks against one another, and you constantly see escalation. They always out sort of smart, or out crazy would be probably better term, out crazy one another. So this is the current state of the world. Every day we are waking up to the news of something happening that we would previously think that, okay, this is a red line. Okay, I think that sending depleted uranium to Ukraine is a dangerous thing. Okay, that happened. Oh, I think that, the NATO commanding officers being inside Ukraine is a red line. Okay, that happened. Okay, I think that sending missiles into Ukraine will do it, right? That would be the sort of starting point of the Armageddon. That happened as well, and he didn't have that kind of crazy outcome that people were talking about. So it is, I think, one thing that the geopolitical analysts do wrong is by constantly trying to hype up their audience. And to a certain degree, I do understand why they want to do it, because you want to be interesting to be listened to, right? If you try to calm your audience, people don't really like that. People like drama. And unfortunately, that's something that these geopolitical analysts, despite the fact that some of them have had prominent positions in different countries, on different governmental institutions,
on different international organizations, that's something that they sort of feed on, this thirst by the audience to talk about like the Armageddon. Okay, this is the end things. We're gonna have a nuclear fallout and everything is going to be destroyed. But that's not the case. No one, in my opinion, can determine the exact point of the destruction. But unfortunately, we can do say one thing, that the trajectory of the activities or the actions, the policies adopted by different countries is moving towards that sort of worst possible outcome. You might not be able to determine the exact point, and there's a reason for that. Because we are moving into, if we look at this from the scientific perspective, we are moving from a certain kind of order. We might not call it justice, but there is an order in the current state of affairs. This is an order backed by the power and the might of the Western governments. We are gradually shifting into a state of chaos and anarchy, right? Different players are rising up, and there's a clash between the sort of global south and the Western powers, right? So we are moving into an anarchic environment, and one of the intrinsic characteristics and features of a chaotic environment is the fact that it is very hard to predict as to what is going to happen within the rules of the said environment. So while we, again, like, I think that when things escalate in a manner that would cause, major wars all throughout the world, a sort of world war or a nuclear sort of fallout or a nuclear war, it would sort of take everyone by surprise, even the people who constantly try to hype up their own audience in order to sort of engagement farm, you know,
The
even
clout
they would
chasing
be,
per se.
yes, they would be surprised as well. So that's all I can say, because quite frankly, we are seeing that the Western world is not willing to back down. They see it, they see the situation as for what it is, which is, the rise of the other countries to prominence, and they are not willing to let go of their supremacy, even if that means that an average individual customer inside Germany has to pay, twice, three times, four times the price that it had to pay before for its electricity bill, for its gas bill. Even if they have to pay, like, I would dare to say 10 times the amount that they were paying before, the leaders in the said countries are viewing it in terms of long-term interest of the country, or at least that's how they justify it for themselves, that okay, certain individuals might hurt, but this is for the greater good of the entire nation. So they're not willing to back down, because they see it as the sort of the pivoting point. You remember when the Islamic Empire sort of collapsed, and then you had the rise of the Western Empire. They sort of see it as the same thing, that this is a major shifting from the current state of war to a new order. The countries of global south are tired of constantly being beaten, constantly being held down, and being denied the rights that they have in order to pursue autonomy, in order to pursue technological advancement, better state of living for their civilians, the prosperity for their own nation. They are tired of that, and I think that they can't really handle that, and that's why you had like three or four major coups d'etats inside Africa in the past 2 or 3 years, right? So they're not going to back them either. Russia and China are not going to back down. Russia is past the point of return. There is no return from what Russia has gone to, right? They can't be. I don't think that an average Russian politician, considering how smart they are, would be so delusional as to think that through certain actions they can win the good opinion of the European countries and United States anymore. The Minsk experience, I think, was a very, sort of, it was a wake-up call for the Russians. So they're not going to be delusional again, despite the rhetoric that they have used in the aftermath of the Trump's presidency or Trump's uh, election into the presidential office. So that's not going to go either. So what we have in this situation is two, you can think of it as kind of vectors, two different vectors that are completely go against one another, trying to dominate one another. And then this environment that is completely that is going into the state of anarchy. And what you have is something that I think, again, like I don't think that a mathematical model can simulate what the future holds for us. I think that things can turn very sourly in a span of just one night. You know, Iran launched attack on Israel, a nuclear power. We don't like Israel, but Israel has nukes, 800 of them. So, this can easily spiral into something that can't be controlled or maintained anymore. So we have to know that despite the fact that we criticize people who say that, okay, at the end of this episode, this certain episode of, United States exporting attackers to Ukraine, at the end of this episode, we're going to have a nuclear war. It's not going to be the case. But I think that one thing we can say for certain is that we are certainly moving towards that direction. I know that I said a whole bunch of things without really answering your question. But again, like as I mentioned, I don't think that even complex matrices and advanced AI models, even they would be able to, accurately simulate the future that we are moving towards to.
Well, I think what you're essentially saying is there is no algorithm, that can predict or measure human evil, first and foremost. And then the second thing that I was actually going to say was we also have to understand that every time that the red line is pushed further and further, it makes us realize that maybe there isn't a red line anymore. So that's essentially what it comes down to. Those are all the questions I had. I know this was a very long interview. I really, really wanted to thank you. I'm so humbled for you to be, on the Muslim Street. Inshallah, we would love to have you again. I think amplifying Iranian voices is very, very important to us, discussing the technology there, the advancements, even, the suffering, the human rights violations, the sanctions, the quality of life, the geopolitics. I think Iran is a very key player when it comes to discussing, global politics and economics. And it's something that the U.S. Or the U.S. audiences do not unfortunately have the exposure to. So, inshallah, the Muslim Street can, build more bridges and bring on more Iranian voices like yourself to educate, the minds of the U.S. and the global ummah at large. But, I'm sure there's a multitude of people that are going to watch this episode and want to follow you on social media. Maybe they have questions for you. Maybe they want to collaborate. Maybe they want to interview you. Would you like to share, your Twitter, your Telegram, your email address, ways for people to contact you or follow you?
Okay, yeah. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to shamelessly plug myself, advertise my own activities. So people can find me at they can subscribe to my Twitter, which is at Safarnejad underline IR. That's my Twitter handle. I have also a Telegram channel that in which I post like more detailed analysis of the things that are happening in the world, in Iran, uh, due to the format, because it provides you with more characters to use. So for more detailed analysis of the things, people can follow or subscribe to Political Aficionado on Telegram, and my Twitter is also Political Aficionado. It's, I think, at Real Political Aficionado in Twitter. I don't post a lot of content on my YouTube. It's mostly, you know, video clips that I edited, or like my own interviews. So people, for video content, they can go to the YouTube. For detailed analysis on things, they can read the Telegram channel of Political Aficionado, and for like average daily commentary on different things, they can subscribe to my Twitter. That's Safarnejad underline IR.
Thank you so much. This is Hina Lotus again from the Muslim Street. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Inshallah, we will have you on again very soon. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me. I also wanted to let you know as well personally, the Muslim Street does have a periodical. We do welcome authors, journalists, writers from all over the world, all over the Ummah, in terms of revolutionary ideas, anti-imperialist ideas, any sort of discourse around religion, politics, economics. We are, again, journalism, uncensored journalism for Muslims by Muslims. So it is like a global media project. I'd love for you to contribute if you ever have time. I know you're a very busy individual. Anyone watching this, please reach out to me as well. And for the Muslim Street, you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on X. You can also find us on Facebook. We are, slowly growing. So inshallah, we'll be on more platforms as the year goes on. But again, thank you so much for tuning in. And, I hope everyone has a great night. Salam.
Salam, and thank you for inviting me to your show.